The man who fixed everything on a Saturday afternoon in June 1975, a father looked his son in the eye and in front of a room full of people and said, "You're dead to me." The son nodded once and walked out. No argument, no tears, just grease under his fingernails and a decision already made. That son was David Hollister. And this story isn't really about tractors. It's about what happens when a man chooses knowledge over inheritance and ends up saving the very father who disowned him. David didn't choose the equipment business. It chose him before he could walk. His grandfather built it. His father grew it. By the time David was a teenager, he knew the dealership better than most grown men. But knowing something and loving it are two very different things. Every day, he watched his father sell brand new John Deere tractors to farmers who couldn't really afford them. Shiny machines, big financing plans, service contracts, the whole package. And every year, those same farmers came back, stressed, stretched thin, one bad harvest from losing everything. But then David noticed something nobody else seemed to see. The farmers driving 30-year-old tractors, the ones everyone laughed at, they slept fine at night. They owed nothing. They fixed their own machines. They weren't trapped. That observation would cost him everything. And eventually, save everything too. It started with a broken-down truck and a wrong turn. Making a delivery one afternoon, David ended up at the farm of a 68-year-old man named Walt Erickson, the man his father called the last dinosaur. Walt farmed with a 1947 tractor he'd bought new. His combine made sounds no machine should make. Most people thought he was stubborn or just too poor to upgrade. David walked to Walt's barn to use the phone. He never made the call. What he found instead was a workshop built over 40 years, every tool imaginable, 3 tractors in pieces, an old man sitting on an overturned bucket, machining his own parts. "Haven't been able to get this part from the factory in 15 years, Walt said without looking up, "so I make them myself." David stood in that doorway longer than he should have, then asked the question that changed his life. "Could you teach me?" Walt looked up slowly. "Your daddy's not going to like that." "No, sir, he's not." "You willing to pay that price?" David thought about the ties, the handshakes, the farmers signing papers for tractors that cost more than their houses. "Yes, sir, I am." Walt wasn't just teaching mechanics, he was teaching a philosophy. "Your father sells dependency," Walt said one afternoon. "Every farmer who finances a new tractor becomes dependent on the dealer to fix it, dependent on the bank to pay for it, dependent on the market to survive. That's not farming, that's sharecropping with extra steps. And the deepest lesson of all, a man who depends on someone else to fix his equipment doesn't really own anything. He just borrows it until it breaks." By June 1975, David had made his decision. He quit, told his father he was leaving to work for Walt. That's when Richard Hollister, standing in his own showroom in front of customers and neighbors, said what he said. "If you walk out that door, you won't be my son anymore. You'll be nothing." David nodded once and walked out. Behind him, his mother crying, his father shouting, the whispers already spreading across the county. He didn't look back. David moved into a small room in Walt's farmhouse, learned everything. By year 2, he was doing jobs Walt's aging hands could no longer manage. Word spread across 4 counties, the Hollister boy who could make a 1948 tractor run like new. Then, in 1982, Walt died. Heart gave out in the barn, slumped over a half-finished repair. Exactly the way he would have wanted. His will left everything to David. You're the son I never had. You learned what I had to teach. Now teach others. David kept the workshop open, hired more people, started teaching others what Walt had taught him. By 1985, 6 employees, customers from 4 counties, the largest independent repair operation in southern Minnesota. And still, not a word from his father. Then the farm crisis hit. Interest rates spiked. Land collapsed. Farmers who had borrowed during the good years found themselves drowning. The auctions started in 1981. By 1985, they were happening every single day. The farmers who had bought new equipment through Hollister Implement, financed, serviced, dependent, they were the first to go under. But the farmers who had brought their old machines to David's barn, the ones who owed nothing and could fix anything, they survived. By spring of 1985, Richard Hollister owed the bank $400,000. Credit gone. Inventory worthless. Customers vanished. 60 days to come up with a plan or lose everything. The dealership, the inventory, even the house. He called every lender in 3 counties. Nobody helped. He called John Deere headquarters. They sent a polite letter. He had one option left, the one he'd been avoiding for 10 years. Richard drove to the old Erickson place on a Tuesday afternoon. He'd never been there, had deliberately avoided that road for a decade, not wanting to see what his son had built. 3 buildings now, trucks and tractors lined up outside. A sign by the road, Erickson Hollister Repair. If it runs, we fix it. David looked up from his work. Neither spoke for a moment. Richard had expected his son to look worn down, diminished. David looked calm, certain, exactly like a man who knew who he was. "I need help," Richard finally said. Those words cost him more than anything he'd ever said in his life. "The bank's going to take everything. I don't know what else to do." David could have said no. Everyone would have understood, but he remembered something Walt told him once. A man's character isn't measured by how he treats people who can help him. It's measured by how he treats people who can't. "Sit down, Dad. Tell me everything." They talked for 3 hours. When Richard finished, David looked out the window. Stop selling dependency. Start selling independence, used equipment, refurbished, rebuilt, priced at what farmers can actually afford. Teach farmers to maintain their own machines instead of making them need you. Cancel the John Deere franchise. Turn the showroom into a used equipment depot. Turn the service bay into a classroom. Richard shook his head. "That's the opposite of everything I've built." "Yes," David said simply. "It is." Silence. "Would you help me? Come back?" "I'll help you, but not as an employee. Equal partners, and we do things my way." Richard Hollister, a man who had answered to no one for 40 years, sat with that. Then, partners. They shook hands. First time they had touched in 10 years.
The first year was brutal. Old customers left. The bank watched nervously. Richard sold the Cadillac. But slowly, the right farmers started coming. The careful ones, the debt-free ones. They bought refurbished equipment, took maintenance classes, told their neighbors. End of 1986, breaking even. End of 1987, profitable. By 1988, the most trusted equipment business in the county. And something more important than the business changed too. One evening on the porch, Richard said quietly, "I spent my whole life making farmers think they needed the newest and the most expensive. And all along, the answer was the opposite." He looked at his son. "Walt was right. The man I called a joke. You were right to walk away. I was wrong to let you go." "You didn't let me go, Dad. You told me to go." There's a difference. I know. And I've regretted it every day for 10 years. David put his hand on his father's shoulder. But I'm here now. We're here now. That's what matters. Richard died in 1994. 9 years working alongside his son, building something more valuable than anything he'd built before. The business is still running today. David's son, named Walter, after the man who started it all, runs it now. Same refurbished equipment, same maintenance classes, same belief. In the lobby, there's a photograph. 3 men in front of an old farmall tractor. Walt, David, Richard. Taken in 1987.
Underneath, Walt's words. A man who depends on someone else to fix his equipment doesn't really own anything. He just borrows it until it breaks. And below that, added after Richard died, a man who can't admit he was wrong doesn't really own his own life either. He just borrows it until the truth catches up. R.H., 1985. David didn't walk away from his father's legacy. He walked toward a different kind of legacy. Built on knowledge instead of sales, independence instead of dependency. And in the end, that legacy saved the very business his father thought he was destroying. So the next time someone tells you you're making a mistake, that you're throwing away your future, walking away from everything that matters, ask yourself, are they seeing clearly? Or are they just seeing what they've always seen? David saw something his father couldn't. It cost him 10 years of silence. It cost him his family. But it saved him. And eventually, it saved his father too. Because sometimes the only way to honor a legacy is to let it go. And sometimes the only way to find your family is to leave them first. Never bet against a man who knows how to fix things. He might just fix you, too.